Our studio guest rolled around a little bit early this morning. Well, being in the agriculture business, he doesn't have much of a choice. I had a friend who was a dairy farmer, and his argument always was that the cows don't wait for you. It's Steve Millington is in the studio.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's 8:23:31. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Steve, of course, is also the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and up early on this balmy morning.
It's nice today. I just commented off air to Bill. He needs to find a better or a different weather forecaster. This 4 degrees stuff just doesn't cut it.
Another one says it'll be 9 on Friday morning and 9 on Saturday morning. A little bit better.
Okay, fine. Coming in this morning, I went past a store that had a marquee out, advertising, and they said, snow shovels on hand. And I swung in there and I said, take that down. I want you to put summer T-shirts available. They didn't think I was funny.
Somehow the winter has changed dramatically.
Boy, yeah. And, I don't really hate winter. I don't like it all that much, but I don't really hate it. But I'm here to tell you that you look at our moisture content water year to date, which I think begins October the 1st. We're up maybe just about an inch over normal. I don't know what the heck normal is, but that's okay. We'll take it. The ground has been comfortable this fall. The moisture has just soaked right down in, and it's going to be down in there to stay. So that's good. I'm not too gung-ho about somewhere between 6 to 10 inches of snow over the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
that could.
But I think that I had a conversation with our director of agriculture at the county fair in the summer. And I remember her telling me, she said, if we go through another summer like we just went through, she said, we'll have trouble. Well, this will help. Yeah,
this will help. We are in fact a high mountain desert, and so we need the winter snowpacks to provide enough water for our irrigation cycle come springtime. So, do I like it? Not really. Do I think we need it? Absolutely.
Although she lives out in Burley where the sun shines all the time.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, as you're planning for your weekend travel and your great holiday event, be concerned, be watchful, keep an eye on that weather. Don't do anything foolish.
Yes, I have a Thanksgiving invitation. I'll put it this way: north of Mountain Home. So I don't know what it's going to be like on Thursday.
That could be a trick over there.
Yes.
Could be a little interesting.
Going by horseback might be easier than driving.
It might be.
We've got a lot to talk about with Steve this morning. It's 8:25. Just quickly, I do want to remind you, we've been telling you about our friends at Tint Lady, where they will come by and do a free estimate for tinting your home or office windows, even your automobile, and they do paint protection. One of the reasons, and somebody shared this with me a couple of weeks ago, and I think this is brilliant. They have done a lot of taxidermy. They have a lot of trophies, hunting trophies around the house. They put in window tints because the window tints will help in breaking, because otherwise that sun will break down these things. You spend a lot of money on these trophies. So we've been telling you, get a free estimate. You can call 736-8469 or go to tintladyidaho.com. Now, they've been in business at Tint Lady for over 20 years, locally owned and operated, 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls. They'll be opening up in just a little over half an hour, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday, Saturday by appointment only. And remember, don't squint, get tint. Steve, we have our first telephone caller of the morning.
Boy, already, here we go.
You're up. You're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Steve.
Hi there.
I've got a couple of real tough questions for Steve.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. First of all, I guess I'd preface that I'm a Republican. But a couple of us were talking, much of us were talking, and we thought as Republican hunters and anglers, sportsmen, if you will, we thought, Trump doesn't understand the West. He would probably want to sell a lot of the public lands off. Now, you and I are going to disagree. I think that's a very bad thing. I think if the state had them, eventually they'd sell them simply because there's not enough money there, and they couldn't generate enough money. So what do you think of that? Put on your Swami yogurt hat. look into the crystal ball.
Now that's very interesting. There are an awful lot of people who say that the federal government should divest itself of all land holdings. One of the notions that I heard was that if they would just divest themselves of all these land holdings, that they could reduce. This was several years ago, and at that time they thought they could make a $2 or $3 trillion dent in the national debt. And that has some appeal to a lot of folks. Now, I don't know that. In fact, we don't have a good feel for where Trump would be. He doesn't come out much on policy issues. He's still taking the wide approach of this is not good for us. We got to do something different. But he doesn't tell us what something is. I don't think that they will necessarily sell the lands. They might, and in fact, that would be contra to the history of public lands. They should revert back to the state, because that's what happened in all of the states east of the Mississippi River and nearly all of the states in what we call the Great Plains of the Midwest area, from the Dakotas south clear into Texas, and most of Colorado. Wyoming is heavily federal lands. Montana, not so much. They've got mostly private land in Montana, although you get over towards the far western reaches, and it's the ones that got stiffed on this whole thing was Idaho and Utah and Arizona and Nevada and some parts of Oregon and hardly any of Washington. We're the ones that really got creamed on this mess. And so I don't think that they would sell the lands to the public nearly so much as they might divest them to the states. That would be an all right deal.
This is from, we've got to get to a break, but this is from newsbf.com. 75% of Boundary County, is federal land, and because of that, they have no tax base. So Senator Crapo, and he's joined even with some Democrats, Michael Bennett from Colorado, to try to ensure that we keep getting the funding for payment in lieu of taxes, because those counties would go bust. More with Steve Millington on the way in just a moment. Steve Millington joining us in studio on this lovely day. In fact, the sunrise this morning, if some of you got a chance to see that, with just a handful of clouds behind it, bright orange.
Yeah, great. Driving in this morning, I have to drive into the sunrise, but boy, it was pretty this morning, the way the color just dissipated across those clouds, and I thought, we really do live in a great area.
Speaking of this area, and of course, a previous caller brought this up, federal lands and the like. We want to delve into that for just a moment. Payment in lieu of taxes, which is the idea is to work this out so that the counties that don't have a tax base can work out a deal where they would get some operating revenue so you can pave the roads and fill the potholes and do things like that. Steve Millington is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. He's in the studio with us. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And the telephone number 736-0300. The payment in lieu of taxes appears it's the only way that these counties could survive.
Well, it provides a huge source of revenue, especially in some of our smaller counties. We talked about, was it Boundary County or Boundary County? They just don't have a, quote, tax base to create revenue for local government. That would be counties, cities, and school districts. Those are the people who get the lion's share of our property tax payments. And so if the property taxes assessed values are minimal, they don't have anything to operate on. And they say, well, that's not that big a problem. I have not seen the numbers for Twin Falls County in the last couple of years. Shame on me. But as I remember, even in Twin Falls County, our payment in lieu number was somewhat north of $1 million a year. And that's a pretty healthy chunk of change, in case you're interested. Now, I know over in Owyhee County, which is to the west of us here, between Twin Falls County and Oregon state line, their county, I could be wrong on this, but I think they pointed out that somewhere in the 80% range of Owyhee County is federal lands. And they just don't have the tax base to support their governmental costs. And so the payment in lieu amount is really critical for places like Owyhee County, for Boundary County, to some extent, even Lincoln County, which includes the city of Shoshone. Those are big dollar numbers for those areas, and without it, they get killed. Well, the problem in Congress is that they look at the PILT payments and they say, well, what the world are these things? And so you find yourself with Idaho and Utah and Wyoming and Montana and Colorado to some extent, Nevada. We're back there begging for money because we do not have a tax base. And they say, well, why not? Well, because 60-70% of our total land mass is federally owned. The state of Idaho in total is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60+% federal ownership. Well, it's a little hard to generate too much revenue when you don't have control of the asset. And that's why, our caller's concerned about, how we're going to handle the fishing and hunting and so forth. Don't sell the land, transfer it back to the states and let the states handle it and manage it and run it. They will figure out how to make it useful for the state enterprise.
We have a caller with us. Caller, want to thank you for your patience. It's 8:37, and you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Good morning.
I don't know if you've ever been told that there's a section or clause in the Idaho Constitution that actually prevents the state from taking the land within its borders that was designated for Bureau of the
Federal
Department of Interior.
Yeah,
and it may prevent Idaho from specifically Idaho from taking any action to do that.
That was written into our articles of statehood, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's written into the Idaho Constitution, and it even has in there forever.
Yeah, and you are probably one of the few people out there, not more than a large population, very, very small population, that understands, in fact, that when Idaho became a state, we basically gave up all of our rights to federal lands.
Yeah, that's how it's written. It's not ambiguous, or it's not very murky. It says that forever that the federal agency would administer that land that wasn't the state didn't already own.
And I think you're right on. I visited with Lawrence Wasden, our Attorney General, at a meeting, and I said, how come we don't pursue this much more vigorously? Let's get after him. And he said, two issues. Number one, the articles of statehood that we signed said that the federal government got to control all the land. They could cede it back to the state of Idaho as or if they chose to. And then the Idaho Constitution says, well, what's federal land is now federal land and will be forever. And so I said, well, can we change those? And he said, well, the Idaho Constitution would have to be amended by public vote to say we want all of the land back. Scratch that clause. That's not applicable in 2016. The more difficult issue would be that we would have to have, and he wasn't sure, and I'm definitely not sure, whether it would be a simple majority or whether it would require a 2/3 vote in the Congress to amend that statehood right so that the United States government could give back to the state of Idaho all federal lands.
We have a break coming up. Want to thank the caller for chiming in, and got into some depth there. That's good. Want to hear more of that? 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock. 34. Bill Colley with you as well, along with Steve Millington, the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve has some thoughts about talk radio coming up in just a moment. Hey, I got to tell people too a little bit. I'm excited about this because. I was just telling Steve Millington, I said, he's often better prepared for this show than I am. I had highlighted one line in a story about payment in lieu of taxes, and he was able to speak about that with an educated mind.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Talk to Lawrence Wasden about it. I mean, you're a guy who's already done all of this work, the heavy lifting.
Well,
and
it's a big issue, and it's one that we cannot hide in Idaho because so much of our asset base is completely locked up and put away. We can't get at it.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my.
The depth you can bring to this, because I'm taking some time off in the middle of December. Well, actually, starting middle of next week, because a big truck is coming here with all of my things from the East Coast, and I got to get all that stuff put away and get it settled in. And unbeknownst to me, this company was more generous with vacation time than I imagined, and I got to use it up.
So it's a use it or lose it program,
Yeah,
right, Bill?
Once I move everything in, I still have a few days to look around and take a look at some of the sites too that I have not yet been able to see. But so you'll be sitting in, I think, starting next Wednesday, almost for a couple of weeks, if not.
I think that's what the schedule shows now. Is that a week from Wednesday, the 2nd or it's the 4th or 5th of December.
Yeah, it's the Wednesday of next week, and
then clear till the.
I'll come back, I think, on the 16th.
On the 16th.
But so, it'll be your baby for 2 weeks.
Yep, it sure will. That could be real interesting. Wow.
But you also have a lot more. You can pick up the telephone and you can find people, and they'll say, yeah, if you ask them to come on the air, where in my case, sometimes it doesn't work. Got a quick couple of notes we want to talk about. There's a fellow, he's a state senator in, was it Arizona? He's a Navajo Indian as well. He made the announcement yesterday that he is leaving the Democrat Party and becoming a Republican because he said, this is the quote, the Republican Party better reflects the values of self-determination and self-empowerment that he holds and wants to emphasize to his district.
And his district, if I remember reading that article, it is not entirely comprised, but mostly comprised of the Native American population. And even though they have some difficulties, they still cling to the idea of self-worth and self-motivation and self-accomplishment. And it's probably to his benefit and to his tribal benefit to espouse a Republican ideal. We need to have people, and especially amongst the Native Americans, they need to be able to stand up and count for themselves. And anybody who believes that a government can take care of a population forever needs to spend a few minutes studying the history of the Native American Indian. That just didn't work out.
I was just reading a story the other day, and I don't recall if I saw it in the Times News or the Statesman or Press Tribune, but it was a story that was about a tribe where they have tremendous gambling revenue, and everyone gets a house purchased for them in a nice house because of the gambling revenue. But the per capita income still is only about $9,000 per year on the reservation.
On that reservation, that's right.
So they're looking for ways to turn that around, and many of them think, you know what, the Republican ideals might just do it.
They need jobs, they need an economy that's growing, and they need the opportunity for those people to become self-sufficient, and that's not something that the Democrats are worried about doing. They want you to be government sufficient, not self-sufficient. Rely on the government. We're the government, and we're going to take care of you.
You've got a program for that. That's what I heard somebody say one time. 847, Steve Millington is our studio guest, and we have a telephone caller joining us on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. And caller, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. Hey, guys. I just wonder, though, when you got people that are leaving the Democrat Party to come to the Republican Party, it's a little frightening to me because, they may be the left has went so far left that it's indistinguishable now, that party. But when you have a Democrat leave to come to the Republican Party, are they going to be like John McCain? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're going to become rhinos.
Yeah, but that was my question. Anyway,
that's a very valid observation. Why would they, after some period of time involved in the public arena, why would they choose to change their allegiance? And this gentleman's statement was well done, and hopefully he will live up to that particular concept that he's after self-sufficiency and self-determination, and good for him. The thing that becomes a concern is, wow, are they for real, or are they just making, quote, political hay, unquote? And the jury is out, so let's give him a break. Let's cut him some slack and tell him to get going and make it happen. And if it doesn't work, then the voters can elect somebody else. Besides which, I think Arizona is kind of a strongly Republican-controlled legislative branch. And so in order for him to have a little bit more voice and a little bit more presence in the state legislature, being a Republican may give him more opportunity to perform satisfactorily than being a Democrat.
And plus the U.S. Senate delegation, you got Jeff Flake as well, who's not quite as moderate or liberal as John McCain. So you might be able to work more closely with those two for the interests of your people.
That's true. That's a very good point.
I want to thank the caller for chiming in this morning. And we have one other point, too, as well. This comes from the Wall Street Journal today. How talk radio is informing the GOP's presidential race. And it says, 1/3 of all Republicans. Now, that may seem like, well, it's just 1/3, but they're the largest bloc when you break down all the different Republicans, how they self-identify. 1/3 are avid talk radio, conservative talk radio listeners, and they are fired up people who don't like the Washington establishment.
That's right, they don't. And some people would say, well, they're a bunch of nut jobs. But think about for a moment where they're getting their information. These are people who are mostly fed up with the Washington establishment, and that's both the political arm and, to a major extent, the media arm. I think Rush Limbaugh kind of coined the phrase the drive-by media.
Right.
So they listen to conservative talk radio. Where else would they get information that would be beneficial or useful to them in supporting their cause and their ideas and their expectations for this country? You're not going to get it from mainline media. You're not going to get it from mostly magazines and newspapers and so forth. They just don't talk about conservative type issues. They're too liberal bent in their comment, in their editorial position. And so if I'm a conservative and I want to find out or become more informed about what's going on, I'm going to listen to conservative talk radio because that's the only place that I can get it. It doesn't happen anywhere else.
Well, and of course, the Republican Party leaders still are having some difficulty with this because a decade ago it was easily said. I mean, I know this. I started my first I was doing part-time talk radio while I was still working in some other areas way back in the 1990s. But my first full-time talk show started right after New Year's in 2004. And we were most of us who considered ourselves conservatives and maybe even many libertarians were behind the war effort. We were behind George W. Bush. We had no use for a John Kerry, still don't, by the way. But I've seen it change, and I think a lot of us, I evolved, and I've seen it as well in a lot of the national hosts. They have lost a lot of that. We talked earlier about the lack of trust people have in government. We've lost trust in both the Republican leadership and the Democrats.
From that standpoint, Bill, I think you're right. I don't think we can just look at one party or the other and say this is the culprit. I think that the people in general have lost all of their confidence in Washington establishment personnel, period, be they Democrat or Republican. There was an article that only 19% of the people think that the government trust the government. That was Republicans, and only 26% of the Democrats trusted the government. So less than 1/4 of the people surveyed trust government. That's an indicator that there's something really wrong here. People just they don't trust them. We just flat don't trust them.
We've got a caller with us.
Okay.
Steve Millington and Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com, 8:53 and 34, and you're up next. All right, we've got another caller, though. Luckily, you got the phones fired up as usual. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning. Well, the problem is you have elitist groups like the Council on Foreign Relations, and they control the heads of both the Republicans and the Democrats. And so you have these elitists that want basically a world government, and you see everything that comes down the pike, goes that direction. And now, of course, we're finding that the United Nations never been our friend, but we're still pushing our Common Core comes down through that, Agenda 21, the refugee program. And so, we better be taking a look at where all of this information's coming from that's putting us into a slave camp.
It's interesting. The caller makes an interesting point about the refugee thing, and that there's two or three not completely separate issues. This morning on the news streamers, you could see where the government of Canada under Trudeau.
Trudeau, is that
Trudeau.
Yeah.
Thank you. I forgot his first name. It's immaterial. Trudeau. They're going to take 25,000 Syrian refugees between now and December 31st. In the next 6 weeks, they're going to take 25,000 Syrian refugees into their country. That's an awful lot. Somebody has got to have an awful lot of vacancies in their residential real estate somewhere to house 25,000 additional folks in a 6-week period of time. Now, if we think that the border between the United States and Mexico is a little porous and people can just come and go however they want and choose and so forth, man, there is nothing between the United States and Canada. Well, there is the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Right.
So what they'll do is they'll come into the
Which
eastern...
is still a cigarette smuggling route.
Yeah, exactly. They'll come into there and they'll just migrate west past Minnesota, for example, where the St. Lawrence River is no longer an issue. They can just walk down into the United States.
One difference is, though, he says that they will not allow single men in. They all have to be families.
Now, that would be a good thing if they'll hold to that statement that they must be a family unit. Okay, fine. That kind of eliminates some of the radical element. Hopefully. but the fact remains, we're going to have, they're just going to pour in here from everywhere. Holy Moses. Just drives me nuts.
Well, and the other part of this, too, public trust. I think the number is 58% of the public in one poll said they want this refugee program at least temporarily stopped. Only 26% want it to continue. Fox did a poll a few days after that first poll came out from Pew, and the Fox poll says now it's about 65% want to hold on this program.
Yeah, put a pause on it. Let's control it. Make sure that we're vetting these people correctly and have a little bit more oversight in who is admitted. And I think that's probably valid. We're only going to need one more real good terrorist attack somewhere, and heaven forbid that it be in the United States. We are seriously the next logical target in this whole mess, but let's hope it doesn't happen.
They promised it, and that's the thing. They seem to keep their promises when they say they're going to do it.
A lot of people discount that. They have their video feeds and their newspaper and their social media feeds and so forth. And they, we're going to do this, and everybody just kind of laughs and scoffs at them and goes on about their daily affairs.
JV team, yeah.
Yeah. However, you go back and look over and they have a long time frame. They are very patient in obtaining their objectives. That if they're going to have an attack on the United States, that doesn't mean it has to be tomorrow or today or even next year. If they can just get it prepared and do it, and create havoc and discord and uncertainty and fear, they'll wait a year for it. They will wait a year for it. And they're perfectly comfortable doing that very thing. So they're getting exactly what they want. They have now turned the NATO forces into an enemy of Russia. And by the way, while you were sleeping, the Chinese government just positioned a major aircraft carrier off the coast of Syria in the port of Tartus.
And they're opening up a military base in Djibouti in Africa.
Yep.
So guess what, folks? It's coming.
It's not going to be fun.
We'll see Steve Millington next week.
Yes.
He'll be back in studio with us.
Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Be careful in your travels. It's going to be a little bit snowy out there. Use extra time. We want you all here safe and sound next week.
News is coming up, we should note, too, as well, at 9 o'clock.